Shag McNally. Do you want to just go down to the list, Courtney? Do you have the list?
Sure. So yeah, Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally, Mark Morgan, Julie Stencil, Christy Belton, Samantha Albert, Director Matt McCombs, yeah, Pat Dorsey. And so that's 7 members, which makes quorum.
Great. And we'll just make note of who's here. So thank you very much. So let's move on to just approval of minutes. I hope everyone got to see the minutes from last meeting. Anybody have any questions or changes? Great. I welcome a motion to approve the minutes.
I so move.
Julie Stencil with second.
Great. That's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Great. We're going to cruise through this. All right. So now we're moving on to the discussion and vote on the legislative concepts to advance to the full Forest Health Council. And I'm going to turn that over to Angela.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Can everyone hear me okay? Great, thanks.
Yeah.
So things are moving fast. We have had 2, I think, really good Wildfire Matters Review Committee meetings, the first on July 20th and then the second on this past Wednesday, the 27th. They voted to have a 3rd meeting of just testimony next Friday, August 5th. And then they plan to make decisions about their legislative priorities on Wednesday, or I can't remember if it's Wednesday, maybe it's on Monday, August 15th. But that meeting will just now be their discussion of legislative proposals. And so just a bit of a reminder of how they function. They are allowed to draft up to 10 bills, but then they are only allowed to advance up to 5 bills, to the legislature. So they'll go through that process on the 15th of identifying their 10 bills that they would like drafters to develop. What that usually means is members come with their concepts. They sort of create a large list. Last year, I think they had about 20 concepts, and then they spend, a couple of hours sort of winnowing them down, having discussions, talking about whether they'll join each other, make compromises, etc. And then it would not be until their meeting at the end of September when they actually vote on the 5 bill concepts that they'll advance. So given all of that, what we did decide on in the July 6th meeting with the full Forest Health Council was that you all, the legislative committee, would take some time to really think about the various concepts that we've talked about and bring some recommendations to the council at our 2-hour meeting next week, which is on August 4th. And you don't have any restrictions on how many concepts you can recommend. So, the list that we shared around with the little blurbs, you are not limited in the number that you recommend to the full council, but the full council has agreed to advance up to 5 as recommendations to the Wildfire Matters Review Committee, just recognizing their limitations. And I think also, the goal here perhaps is to throw our weight behind things that we really want to see happen because just from watching the last 2 Wildfire Matters Review Committee meetings, and, Matt, feel free to chime in here. I think there are several concepts that people are pretty energized about this year. And I would say probably more than 5. And so I think it's going to be a little tough for them to narrow it down. So if there are certain concepts that we feel really cannot be missed this legislative session, this is our opportunity to really throw our weight. So all that said, we sent around those blurbs that Courtney and I threw together with the concepts that you all voted on. They are ordered, from sort of most votes to least votes, if that's helpful at all. But really, it's the 7 that we said, there does seem to be decent support for these. So I'll stop there. I think the goal for today is really to, talk through those concepts and decide what kind of recommendations you want to make to the full council next week. And then I think the other decision point to make is Jody Shattuck McNally is already on the agenda for the 5th to present the council's priority concepts. If anybody else would like to join her, that is an option, so we could talk about that. Director McCombs, do you have anything to add?
No, I was just going to
foot stomp. I wouldn't say it's all over the map, but there's a broad range of issues that have been dialogued around, each that seemed very intriguing and engaged by members of the committee. So I think if we are wanting to be successful this year in our sort of first year in this form, I think narrowing our focus to the key 1, 2, 3, perhaps key initiative that we want the committee to consider for action this year would probably be in our best interest. And I think that, again, if it's the top 1 and 2 that the entire council can get around and articulate clearly what the need is, I think we'll have success. Minus any high levels of controversy, anything that we might advance. But I don't see any of the things that we have currently on our list that are controversial.
Thanks for the insight. So Angela, do you want to just go through the list and have us all talk through them?
Sure. And maybe before I do just want to create some space. You know, again, this has all happened pretty quickly. We asked folks in the July 6th meeting to propose concepts. We asked folks to vote on them. You all decided to drop 3 that did not receive very many votes. Is there anything left off of this remaining list that we have that people feel is an absolutely burning priority? Or does everybody feel like we've captured our general priorities fairly well in this list? I just wanted to create some space for that. Everyone happy? Okay. Sure thing. So let's go through it. And, you know, Chair Shattuck McNally, I might also leave it to you to decide how we want to go about today in terms of voting. I mean, again, you have a couple options here. You all could decide to recommend all of these concepts to the council and let them decide which ones to drop. Or, you know, we can talk through the merits of each, and maybe that means that, you know, a couple don't rise to the level of us recommending them. Yeah, Director McCombs, do you have some thoughts?
Just real quick before that question's answered, will the council have the same technical abilities or the same sort of voting or consensus driving? You know, so in the fire commission, we got these great little voting things. I know we don't have those, or maybe we do, but will we be able to rank in real time and get immediate feedback through voting on, so that we could move aggressively if we were to send a larger list to the larger body?
I think that's a great idea, and I definitely think we could. We won't have time to get people, you know, remote clickers or whatever, but there are lots of online tools that will allow you to do that, so we can make sure we can do that.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, good. So yeah, I'll just walk through each of these. I'll share my screen, and I think what I would suggest is if there are folks who are particularly strong advocates, you know, say sort of 3 sentences about why you think this is an absolutely top priority, and we can have a conversation. And maybe let's give ourselves, we'll make sure that we are done this phase by, let's say, 9:15. And actually, did somebody say they have to leave?
I have to present at Club 20, so I apologize. Right at 9 o'clock, or I mean, I got to get off to be able to get my Zoom spun up. So I hope that doesn't. Can I give my proxy to somebody? Is that allowed? I have no idea. Just so that you can actually have enough people to vote to move these things forward.
Maybe.
Yeah. So how, Courtney? Do we have 6 or 7 members?
We have 7 present, and so Director McCombs, even if you leave, we have quorum.
Okay, very good.
Good. Okay.
Okay. Can people see that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. So the first concept is around consistent investments in Good Neighbor Authority. And again, this was sort of the top voted concept. Essentially, Good Neighbor Authority allows State Forest Service to work on federal lands. You know, Mark Morgan, I believe you made a strong case for this just being a well-run program that gives some certainty to industry. So I will let Director McCombs or Mr. Morgan say anything else they'd like to say on this.
Were you asking for my comment?
If you'd like to give one.
Yeah, I just think that it's a hands-on tool that we know works. And if if we support our state forest service with the funding, then it's a way we can get something going now fast. And the feds move slowly, and in the past, I've seen this kind of situation really speed up the time frame for actual management on the ground. So that's why I'm in love with it. You have to fund the state forest service adequately to put the people on the ground. That's why I keep coming back to adequate, consistent funding for the state forest service, because I want to use the state forest service to get management work done on the feds that the feds aren't getting done. It's as simple as that.
So I don't disagree in any way, shape, or form. The only context I'd provide is that we are in the process right now of negotiating with the Rocky Mountain region for what I'm calling a shared stewardship surge proposal to add roughly anywhere between 10 to 20% capacity on the ground in state forest service employees, foresters funded by the region over the next 5 years. There's a lot of support for that at the Rocky Mountain region. And so when I look at this one, I think more about modernizing and ensuring that we're an employer of choice so that we can actually recruit and retain the employees that we do hire amidst the massive amount of competition for foresters and operators and the like. So that is a larger conversation that I would be more than happy to get in depth with, but I don't know if today's the day, but it would be more about employer of choice, competitiveness, recruiting and retaining, which really talks about ensuring that we can pay the same as our friends in other states and certainly across state government. But that's a much larger conversation. If it were to just stay simple about just adding capacity and growing funding to stabilize the workforce, we'd certainly be supportive of that as well and could put that money to use. But I just wanted you to know that we are negotiating with the region. They're likely to see sizable investments. And so in the state forest service for the next 5 years. And if you think about that within the context of what's in the Manchin deal, there's an additional $5 billion theoretically if this bill passes in the next 2 weeks coming to the feds, and they're going to look to be doing that work as well through state and private partnerships.
I see Samantha has her hand and Pat both have their hands raised real quick for just brief comments so we can move through this.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So quick question, do we have a dollar figure if we were just to recommend increasing the investment that would be tangible? And is that our job, I guess, to assign that dollar figure?
We have a round number as it relates to like increasing compensation just to be competitive with other states and other state agencies. But it's based on loose data. We are in the midst of doing a salary study through the Council of Western State Foresters right now. And we'll have that data in the next 2 to 3 weeks, which would give us a much better indicator of what that investment would look like. And it would probably come in the form of an additional line item increase in our annual HFDC, which Healthy Forest Vibrant Communities line item, which allows that funding is almost specifically for capacity and staffing with some focus on implementation.
Yeah, and mine is really more of a question about when you specify good neighbor authority, that's for one authority, and there's several other authorities that we could be using. So should that language be a bit broader?
Yeah. I mean, I love this conversation. This is one I plan to bring to y'all at some point in the future, but it is a little bit more nuanced. But I could have something ready, at least very loosely ready for our full meeting. But there's also, there's also a lot of coordination that needs to go on with CSU and DNR on some of these discussions, as well as acknowledging we want to be in concert with our administrators.
Do we
So-
have,
Go ahead, Mr. Morgan.
I said, do we have a shoot from the hip ballpark number, what it would take to ramp up your workforce?
The number that we've been using is right around 3 million. Essentially take that 2 million line item and make it 5.
Okay, that's, it's, you have a job to do the planning and do the work, and we have a job to get out there and shake the bushes and get people motivated. And Pat's comment was excellent, that we have to have a rough number to work from. And they need to hear that number from a variety of sources. So that's really helpful, Matt. Thank you.
I'm a little on a limb here, folks, so just be aware.
Okay. No, I'm aware. And so I just, again, want to remind everybody, this is not the final list. This is just for these 1 or 2 items that we're trying to, because we're moving so quick, 1 or 2 items that we can, maybe 3, to get through and have focused on and be accomplished, to gain momentum for bigger and more projects going forward. So let's kind of keep that in mind as we go forward. So thank you. Angela, next one.
Can I clarify real quick here? So this original concept was to directly fund the State Forest Service to increase their Good Neighbor Authority work. Is the council interested, or is this committee interested and open to tweaking this such that it would recommend basically funding, the capacity of the State Forest Service in general to be able to complete this work? Because I think that's what Director McCombs is suggesting here.
So are you saying investments in the GNA and increasing capacity, or just in general increasing capacity?
Yeah, the nuance is that to increase capacity, you have to be able to attract and hire. And that's where the struggle is occurring at the federal level. And we're having certainly some struggles. We have all these anecdotals where people are turning down our jobs because we just don't pay enough money. And we are losing employees consistently to the private industry in other states because, again, we're just not competitive. And that there's a lot of reasons for that. But if you can hire and maintain your workforce, we can actually put all of this work, all of these other investments that are coming down to ground and actually have success and then maintain a vibrant workforce that continue to plan and execute the work year in and year out. But again, I wasn't totally prepared for this conversation. We're trying to do everything we can to develop the data internally, but it's a known problem. I'll put it that way. Certainly people in the community in which we operate know this challenge, so it would not be a surprise to anyone. It just, again, would look a little bold on my part.
I see Pat has her hand raised. And then we
Yeah,
can move
I
on.
was just going to suggest, that's enough of a change from what it was originally intended. I'd like to go through the other issues and then maybe come back.
And I support that as well. I don't necessarily want to stop on this tangent
Okay.
because I don't want to steer the group in a place that we're not ready to go.
Okay, that's fine. Let's come back to that conversation. Let's get through the rest of the list. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So number 2 here was invest in local, state, and or federal agency planning and project management capacity. So this is a bit around the same theme as what Director McCombs was mentioning. Basically, the problem is that as more money becomes available for implementation, we don't necessarily have this huge pipeline of shovel-ready projects, right? We need folks who can do the planning work, who can do the project layout, who can do the contracting. And so the concept here would be for the state legislature to make some more resources available to help local governments and state agencies hire additional capacity for this work. This could look a little bit different depending on what the focus is. There are a couple programs that already exist and support local capacity. So COSWAP, for example, the Landscape Resilience Investment Grant, and then FurWorm do already support capacity. So folks, if they get these grants, they can actually pay staff, planning staff, management staff with these funds. So you could suggest further investments in those, or even altering, the proportion of funding that could go to capacity building. And then, as we've discussed, healthy forest, vibrant communities can support capacity increases at the State Forest Service. So any comments folks have on this one?
Anybody? Oops, I see Mr. Morgan.
I don't want to get this too narrow, but one thing I really see the use of this process, we have to go through this process because I think the state and county need to get involved in Federal Forest Service planning on their land use policies, especially in fire, because right now we have the Federal Forest Service is doing a lot of their long-term fire planning. And then when we have these huge fire events, the state and the counties have to deal with the results. And they weren't in on the front end of the planning. of what they were going to burn and not burn, and yet they have to deal with the results afterwards. So my focus is much more narrow than what you're talking about here. But to me, that's extremely important, and we have to build that capacity so that state and county people can get in on this planning in advance.
Christy?
And I just typed a quick comment. Mr. Morgan's comments that helps clarify it for me. But, you know, I have a little bit of heartburn over a lot of money used on planning when nothing gets done with it. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
Yeah, that's,
Like-
yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking the same thing. Any other comments so we can kind of move through? So Matt has to leave here shortly, so. Okay. Angela, do you want to move on to the next one?
Okay, so this one, invest in workforce development programs, and this one is quite specific, I would say, to hand crew work. So, you know, the Colorado Youth Corps Association and Department of Corrections Swift Crews both provide opportunities to train folks in wildfire risk mitigation work, forestry work, chainsaw work, etc. Again, there are several existing programs that already support, you know, these types of crews. The COSWAP program, there's some federal funding that's further supporting their work. And let's see here. Yeah, and then FirWorm as well, which, you know, does preferentially, oh, sorry, I said it out. The Forest Restoration and Wildfire Risk Mitigation Grant Program does favor projects that use conservation corps. So, you know, and a bit of background, there was testimony from the Colorado Youth Corps Association at one of our Wildfire Matters Review Committee meetings. You know, it's well received by the council or the committee. I think, you know, I think what it comes down to is, do we feel that these are meaningful investments in terms of getting young people and incarcerated folks trained? You know, obviously there's some conversation about getting these folks even trained on equipment moving forward. So I'll just leave it at that if anybody has any comments.
Angela, do we need a bill to continue funding these programs? Is that the deal? Is it like 1 year or 2 year funding and we need to reinvest?
Potentially, yes. So COSWAP, for example, had an initial $17.5 million. We did secure $4 million additional dollars last year. At least $2 million of that will go to support hand crew work. But yeah, we are in a position where we're, you know, wondering what it looks like moving forward in the future. And then I think FirWorm as well. FirWorm has $8 million secured of general fund per year. You know, I think more funding can be better, especially if we're scaling up, you know, in a way that makes sense. So hopefully that's helpful.
And I think this is also still kind of that tool to kind of increase capacity to help folks that can go into number 1 and 2, right? And so goals. So I just kind of feel like it's kind of the other piece that needs to, we can recruit and retain, because otherwise we're training folks and then they're going elsewhere. Is that a fair statement, Matt?
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's, any other comments or questions on that one?
This one seems like a total win-win to me.
Okay. Let's move on to the fourth one. And Matt, do you want to just quickly before you leave, Matt, state your preferences quick?
Yeah, just, I mean, obviously agency modernization is something that we're interested in, but there's a lot of work to be done there. As it relates to the things that are tied to that is the pipeline. And I absolutely love number 4. I think that this is a win-win-win all the way across the board. And I would hope that we would expand our visage, right? And think about other community colleges that are potentially ready to grow these programs. Western Community College in Grand Junction already has a wildfire program that's well developed. Alamosa's got a well-developed program. So be thinking about other community colleges, 2-year programs that could benefit from this type of investment in programming. We could stand them up and search for go after SAF accreditation using FRCC as the model. So that was just the only thing I would add. But this one is the one it's very exciting. We're building a pipeline, an internship program. I've got commitments from Warner College to invest a sizable amount of money. We're going to invest a sizable amount of money to build get them right when they're when they enter, put them on as interns and put them into full-time jobs that are hopefully well-paying and sustainable. So this is one I probably, of all the ones that are out there, this is the one I'm most excited about. If you want to scroll down, I could just give you a couple more. And then I got to run. The nursery, yep, we're $500,000 or we're $5 million short on the full request. There's plenty of support in the legislature, I think, to reconsider making that other half of that investment. It's critical in order for us to actually realize the capacity that we're looking to grow. No pun intended. So however we put that little egg somewhere, that's gonna make sense. But I'm already talking to legislators that are interested in carrying that. We have a program that kind of does this, that will be standing up and offering the first funds in March of this year. So I feel like we have an opportunity to, at least for 1 year, think about how we need to support that programming after that first program hits and where those gaps are. So this might be one we might want to take a year off on. Absolutely see we could an infusion of funding into HFEC in the business loan program would allow us to make more grants for folks that are struggling to get financing to grow their businesses to meet the demand. So that's one that I think always has the potential to be impactful. And then we'll head down. Is that it? No, there's one more. That's it. So yeah, right now it's only 1.5 million roughly in the business loan fund. We're seeing a lot of interest in those funds because, again, it's hard to get financing for heavy equipment that costs anywhere from $500,000 to $2 million. Guys, I got to run. I have all the faith in all of you to move these things forward, and I look forward to the conversation as a larger group. And if not breaking any rules, though, if anyone needs offline conversation to have better context without getting into the decision-making stuff, I'm happy to be available for you at any time. So you just shoot me a text, and I'll find a way to get back to you if you have follow-on questions.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that.
Thanks. Really appreciate it. I'm very excited about the future, guys.
Yeah. Have a good weekend. Take care. Okay, everyone. I just thought it'd be great to have his insights before he had to leave. So, Angela, if you want to scroll back up, where were we on 3 or 4? Right there, 4?
I think we're on 4. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think, Mark, we know how you feel about this, but let's go ahead and have your I know you're pretty strong along with Matt on this one too.
Yeah. I really appreciate everybody's support here and everything. I just believe in this. And I think the key points, and just keeping it real short, we got to start in high school. And I think a big thing also is the agencies. We need to encourage agencies to really do a determination of what level of education they need to fill the positions that they have. I think it's a big negative for a lot of students. They don't want to graduate with $100,000 in debt, and that's a huge problem for them. And they choose other disciplines, and the agencies also, it's another impediment for students. A lot of the agencies are pretty low paying, and so they can make more money doing something else, and then they miss out on that basically career development path that they get from a part-time job or a summer job. So anything that we can do to, narrow that gap, and it can be internships. I don't know what you want to call it, but I think we've got to start growing our own. We got some great programs. Matt's exactly right. I beat the drum for Front Range Community College because it's a 30-year program and they do great work. And I'm familiar with them, and I know them, and I know what they do. But we will need more than that. We will need multiple programs like that, and he's exactly correct on that. I don't know what more to say. You've heard it all from me.
So, and I'm glad that Director McCombs brought up that these other community colleges might have programs that could, basically copy what Front Range is doing. And that might attract support from around the state, because then they can see that, Adams and Mesa and some of those others could have this opportunity for all around the state. And so that is also kind of a attractive thought for me that, we can talk about, investing and expanding Front Range. And that might be the first step, but then also supporting these other universities to, attract for these other schools and for those students in those areas that are looking for those opportunities, just like Mark had mentioned, something that is something they're interested in and not have to incur a lot of debt, like my son who's in his PhD program right now. So Julie and then Christy.
Yeah, thank you. I guess as I read this one, and maybe this is not something we need to worry about right now, but I was thinking as this is advancing to the larger committee, or if it's advancing, I think maybe just stating this one a little differently, I feel like the problem is really stated more at the very end, right? I think we start talking about some stuff on number 4 at the front end, as opposed to coming at this one from a position of the problem is X. We don't have enough of X, Y, and Z. And here's what we think, our legislation and our role could look like in helping solve that problem. I think we start this one by kind of telling the Front Range story. But I think helping the larger council understand what really is the problem here and how we think there is a fix. Because as I've been listening to the information around this one, I think I'm hearing 2 problems. I mean, one, we need to get the students, staying at these programs, and they need to be cost effective and really funneling them to being educated and trained to fit the jobs the forests really need. But then on the second hand, it sounds like we have a shortage of educators too. And so if you don't have the folks in the classroom, is that because of funding? Are they not being paid enough? Do they need certifications and things? So where is the plug to get the bodies in the room?
I've been working on this really hard for a long time, and a lot of this could just be redirected resources that already exist.
Okay.
If the educational institutions got some direction to say that this is a priority, the ask here is not huge. At Front Range Community College, as an example, 2 faculty positions and a technician would be huge. We're not talking about, right now you've got 2 full-time instructors dealing with 450 students in 20 classes. And they're very dedicated and they're good people, but these ladies are overwhelmed. And right now we're developing a pipeline of high school students, and we don't have the capacity to deal with them.
Teach them.
They need, in the world of issues that we're dealing with, their needs are relatively small. They need some way to lease transportation, because forestry is taught and learned out in the field. Right now we have these kids showing up out to our facility. They drive their own vehicles, and we park 40 vehicles between the rows of lumber so that they can have classes out here and have a place to work. And I think really their needs are relatively small, and the dollar amounts are relatively small. What we need is some direction from above. And I've been trying to figure out how to connect that switch through the state. I had a chance to speak to the Wildfire Matters Committee Wednesday, and I went down and testified about this very item. And I think it was pretty well received. And I think we may get some help there, and I think we've got a good message there. And this doesn't need to be a bill so much, or some money. If somebody's got to, I don't know, crack some heads together and say, this is the problem and you people need to fix it. It's very frustrating to me for that reason. And right now we've got new director and new vice president for the college up there. We've got an opportunity here, I think, to steer this. If we can, I don't know who to ask to tell these guys to get with the program. It's as simple as that. Thank you.
Christy.
So piggybacking on what Mark was saying, so we're dealing with this in the National Forest up here also, with these education requirements for people, and cost of living here is ridiculous, pay is low. So many of these positions aren't filled. Who determines the requirements for the education requirements for employment? And I'm wondering, as a committee, rather than asking for more money, maybe some of this just is just pressure. Are we able to, for lack of a better way to put it, shine a light on this cockroach so that everybody can see this really, could be solved without a ton of money, but really just adjusting the rules a little bit so that people don't have to have a 4-year education with $100,000, student debt to go work on forest fires. Are we better off to take this one and make it more of a pressure item?
So I can provide a little bit of insight on the question that you asked, Christy. So in terms of educational requirements, those are determined by two people. They're determined by HR, who develops the job classifications, but then they're also determined by a hiring manager. And it's going to vary between the state and the feds, but the little experience that I have at the state, the hiring manager actually has a good amount of control over the educational requirements, depending on the position classification. Sometimes those classifications are set by HR, and you're talking about a much bigger overhaul of their classification system. But I would say at the state, in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion, we're moving towards a model where we'd rather reduce the educational requirements and highlight people's experience. So basically ask, what kind of experience do you have, to determine hiring? I don't know if that's the case at the State Forest Service, and it would be a good question to ask. Before we move on to the next one, and we should, because we're running out of time here, I am hearing two different concepts here. I think on the one hand is a relatively straightforward funding ask, basically that says the community colleges need to expand their forestry programs. The state needs to make investments there. And then I think the other ask is, could we as a council get in touch with the HR and managers of the various agencies and have this conversation about requirements? So I think those are sort of two different concepts. And I think the second one, honestly, the council would have to vote on it, but perhaps separately. It's probably something the council could move forward on outside of this legislative process. So I just wanted to see if I'm getting this right.
I think you're spot on. Everybody kind of thumbs up if you agree. And I still think that beginning part is, but putting, if we don't name it and ask for it, it's not going to go forward. And if we need to increase the capacity, even if we start at Front Range and then we're able to replicate it around the state and say that that's what we wish to see, I think it's definitely something, another piece of this puzzle to get the other two up the top done, right? And so that's how I see it. So let's move on to that last one so we can have this discussion, because I want to honor everyone's time. And if you're like me, you've got things coming up at 9:30, so we want to keep moving. So
this next one is the Forest Service Nursery. This one is pretty straightforward. I think, as Director McComb said, we requested over $10 million last year, and 2.5 staff to expand the nursery. We secured half of that, $5 million, and so this would basically be asking for the other half. So it's really straightforward.
So I just want to jump in real quick. I heard him say that he's already thinking he might have secured this with another avenue. And I think we should keep it on the list and say this is on our list, but if it's already maybe another avenue, we should maybe just leave it there, but not make it prioritized, because maybe there's another avenue and then we can focus on the other two. And just in the sake of time, I hope that's okay just to kind of say that, and we want to move on. Everybody thumbs up so we can cover the last couple. All right, let's do that.
So this one, I think it did receive a good amount of support from folks, but Director McCombs did also make this point that they just passed a program that does this last year. So I'm not sure how folks feel about letting this new program, funded by HB 22-1011 with $10 million last year, let it form up, play out, see how it goes, and then come back to this next year.
So I'll say this again too. I feel like this is something we want to say. I think we all want to say we want to support and look at keeping on the list that we think this is an important program and project to keep going. And then, yes, I do think that was a good point he made, that we did get the $10 million. We know that's just drops in the bucket, but let's give this program a chance to work and then show the metrics, and then we can, yeah. So I think, I think keep it as like this is something we think is important, but maybe not one of our priorities. We'll just wait and see how it goes. Yeah. Thumbs up to move forward, everybody. Okay, let's move on.
So this final one is a little bit broad. Essentially, we heard strong interest in creating some more incentives for private industry, specifically the logging and grazing industries. And so when Courtney and I were looking at this, we basically looked at a few opportunities that either have existed or currently exist at the state to give you an idea of what this could look like. So again, we have an existing forest business loan program, which is quite a flexible loan program for forest products companies. It's a revolving loan program at the State Forest Service. As Director McComb said, I think it has about $1.5 million available right now. So it could be an opportunity to expand funding there. And then a couple other concepts, we've had a state sales tax exemption for beetle killed wood in the past. And then last session, one bill failed that sort of had two different concepts within it, HB 22-1166. It included a 50% cost share internship program. So basically the state would support half of the cost of companies hiring interns, as well as up to a $10,000 tax credit for equipment purchases by forest products companies. It sounds like part of the reason that did not pass is because the governor's office is not super excited about large tax credits for industry. So just a heads up there. But we have heard, I think, some interest this session again in this internship program concept. So I'm curious if folks have thoughts about these different components or if we've left something out in terms of what industry needs from the state.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes. I have a little bit of a problem here in that I've been asked to represent industry, and then I have my own personal views. My personal views are that we don't need huge tax credits or financial incentives. The thing that industry most needs is a consistency of program. If you have a trained workforce in the agencies and they're doing their work and they're putting up the work, then it's our job to make the investments, recruit the people, and go to work. Now, as far as recruiting the people, that portion of it, internships, I think they don't have to be huge and they could be relatively short-term. But I think there may be some opportunity with some internships. I'm not of a mindset personally that I need to come begging to the state for money to run my business, and I don't think other businesses should as well, and that's my personal opinion. Now, coming from an industry standpoint, there may be people that feel they need that help, and I don't want to make light of their concerns, but I think your revolving loan fund, I know guys have used that. You get it. If they can't find financing any other way, then that's helpful to some people. I think the tax credits are always a deal killer, and I'd rather get something done than get a tax credit. I mean, it's as simple as that. Let's get some work done. And the internships, anything to get students and kids out and a job on the ground in the summer while they're going to school part-time, I'll try any possible way to get that done. So that's my take on it, and I thank you for your time.
Julie.
Yeah, I guess what I was hearing on this one is, where, in my mind, my question was, where are there other opportunities to expand, who can be helping? Because if I think of this in the context of forest health and fuels mitigation, the grazing efforts help, right? So how do we let folks know of those opportunities and sort of, and I get incentives maybe not be the key for some, but you want those folks to bring the cattle there as opposed to somewhere else, right? Again, it's got to be competitive. There's got to be a reason why they're picking the state land versus somewhere else. And same for other industries, right? I mean, I'm just thinking from the utility perspective, if you've got facilities coming through state lands and under those permits, you've got limited ability to undertake certain actions. How can we change that to to give additional rights, I mean, it gets sticky, right? I mean, you've got certain areas in which you're allowed to touch those lands, yet if you could touch them a little further, even though that may be, you know, under the state's authority, it reduces risk to assets, facilities, et cetera. How do you strike that balance? Is this a vehicle to do that? It's probably a bigger one. And maybe, I don't know if this is a low hanging fruit or if this is a longer term conversation, but it sounds like there's opportunity to grow here.
So I agree. I think this needs to stay on the list, but I don't know if it should be on our top 2, because I still feel like we need to have a lot of conversations. Because I think looking back at that, it failed 2 different bills last year, and kind of unpacking that. And then I see Christy's comment about maybe it's not really incentives. Like Mark says, maybe not everyone needs the incentive. We need to remove maybe some of the barriers and the challenges. And then maybe we need to have some innovative outside the box talking conversations. We haven't had a chance. I mean, Christy provided some information, but we haven't had a chance to have a really presentation and a lot of in-depth conversation. Not saying that this is not something we could try to, in a month or so, when we really come and look at this, maybe think of something really solid that would pass. Maybe we should just have more conversations on this going forward. Pat, go ahead and
Yeah, I typed into the chat that I like the intern program and the forest, increasing maybe the amount of money in the forest business loan, depending on how many people are currently using that. Like, do we need more? But if we're going to scale up, I think providing opportunities for people to expand their businesses in some reasonable fashion makes sense to me.
thanks for those comments. You guys are all just bringing some great conversations and points. So I really appreciate the conversation. We're getting really close to the end. Angela, you want to keep us moving forward, and what process do you want us to go at this point?
Sure thing. So from what I've been hearing, it sounds like, I'm just going to make some notes here. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that I think maybe everyone's okay with dropping 6 because we feel like it's playing out and we want to see what happens. Anybody disagree with that?
I think pulling it off this list, but putting it maybe to the parking lot for future things. I mean, I don't want to just like pull it off the list and then we forget about it. I like to have a separate list of tier 2 maybe, or ideas. So we move some of these off, but they go into a parking lot or a forum that, hey, these are still things we want to have conversations about and discuss or keep an eye on for a year. Excuse me. And that's kind of how I feel. I don't know what everyone thinks about that.
Yeah, I think it's a prioritization, right? It's what is this year, and then what is it's on the list, but trying to get most bang for our buck this year versus longer term. So I agree, like tier 1, tier 2.
I guess for me, I misunderstood because I think Furworm and CoSwap and those programs are really useful in getting work done on private land. For one thing, they're usually providing a match for a federal grant or something like that. So that money is getting leveraged. So I thought that was one we were keeping. So I misunderstood.
I think what we're trying to do is prioritize 1 to 3, maybe. And so this list, I think these are ones that we all think are important and care about, but we need to prioritize because what Angela said, they have only so many bills, and we want to be able to be successful and show that we're going to actually move things through like the Fire Commission did last year. And so I think if we just kind of draw the line and here's our tier 1, and then the rest of these are tier 2 that we want to still, consider maybe in the future and things like that, and move forward and continue to have conversations about, and Christy, go ahead.
I just have a quick question, probably naivety on my part. But I'm looking at our participation, and I think we've got about 14 people on this committee, if I'm reading that correctly. And there seems to be really just a core group of people that are taking the time to educate themselves and participate. My question is, when we as a committee start to make decisions, it feels a little strange that we're going to make decisions with 14 people, half of which have not, maybe are not involved and up to speed. Is that it's sort of a question, maybe a little bit of a statement. It seems like our time might be wasted if other people can vote and have not even been a part of our conversations.
So great question, Christy. Anybody who's not on this call today is not voting. So the structure of this committee is that if we have a majority, then we can vote. So it's the folks on this call today who get to do that.
Is there a point at which we, ask those who have not attended meetings that they go ahead and step off of the committee?
Yes, definitely. And those are conversations we've been having with the other committee that's having a similar issue. So we can go forward with that. Maybe I'm wondering what the best way to do this would be. Do you want me to take 2 seconds to just put these in a list at the top so you can see them all at once? And then would folks feel comfortable putting their, here's the first question. Does everybody want to advance 3 top priorities to the full council?
Yeah.
Anybody disagree with that? Okay. And do you still want to include the others as sort of tier 2 so that the other members of the council can see them and understand what we've been talking about? Or
Yeah, I think that we should keep it as tier 2 just so they know that there's things that we've talked about and that we think they're important and that we want to see going forward in the years to come, that these are things we might need to revisit and continue to have conversations and continue to explore. Because I think if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And I feel like if we pull it off the list, it might be thinking we don't think this is something we should talk or think about anymore. And I think these are all on the list for a reason. The other ones got voted off, right? And I just think keeping them in front of everyone, it's important. And even if they get done in other ways, then we can take them off. But I still think there's some really important things to keep talking about. And Angela, were you thinking about just having people put in the chat their vote or their top 3? Or
yeah, their top 3, and then Courtney and I can quickly scribble them down and figure out what's coming out on top. So just bear with me here. Okay, so can everybody see those? And again, I dropped invest in local match because we have a program that's doing that. Okay, great. Thanks, Christy. So yeah, if you would all like to just put in the chat your top 3, Courtney and I will scribble down what those are, and hopefully we have a bit of consensus. So if you just want to take max 2 minutes to do that, that'd be great.
is that all 7 or just the ones that are highlighted? Because the highlighting is confusing me.
Sorry, yeah, the highlights are just there because the comments. So it's 6 of them. I dropped the one that's around local match because it sounded like folks felt like they were happy with the existing program.
Okay, thank you.
And if people want to do a blind vote, well, does anybody care that much? If people want to do a blind vote, you could email Courtney and I your top 3.
I'm having a little trouble here. How do we go about voting this?
Okay, so just put in the chat, Mark, your top 3 given this list. So see the numbers 1 to 6.
Okay.
You can just put the numbers in the chat.
We should be good. Thank you.
And I'll have to say this is hard, I think.
4. And number 1. And number 2.
Okay, I'm almost through here. Anybody else still need to put theirs in? Okay, so we have Pat Dorsey, Julie Stencil, Samantha Albert, Christy Belton, Mark Morgan, and Jody Shattuck McNally. We missing anybody? We're good. Okay, well then we have our winners. So according to my votes, and some of you might be already tallying it up, 1, 3, and 4. And I'll put the little graph I made. Are our winners. If my math is right. So do people see those little plus signs in the chat?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So do we feel good about that? Do we want to take a vote to advance these as our 3 top priorities and then parking lot the rest for the rest of the council?
Or not parking lot, maybe you just make tier 2 in the order, like putting 2 and then
Tier 2.
and still, so we still have, I think it'd be great still to keep that there to show that the others, so that our top 3 tier 1 and then making number 2 the top of tier 2, just in case they say, oh, we might want to advance one more, because that's what we do with commissioners. We always ask for the ones that if you had more money or more time, which one would you really want to see done? And then we have that one other one that we could just advance. So,
Well, and you're exactly right, because we can advance up to 5, or the full council can advance up to 5 to the Wildfire Matters Review Committee. So,
well, what's the group feel? Do we want to add 3 or 4?
I'd say we add 3 and keep number 2 as our very first one.
I agree.
Agree.
I think I keep hearing Director McComb say, be effective, right? Like get something in and get it done this year. And I think 3 is probably the right number.
Okay. Is everyone okay with that tier 1, tier 2, and listing number 2 at the top of tier 2?
Very much.
So could we vote on, so this is, I need a motion then for, and is it right, Angela, if I do this, I need a motion to advance for our tier 1 priorities of 1, 3, and 4 for tier 1, and then also keeping and submitting right behind that a list of tier 2 with number 2 at the top, and then listing the others in order that we went through today. Does someone like to make that motion?
I can make the motion.
A second?
I'll second.
I would second.
Okay, all those, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, well done. Well done, everyone. Thanks for your time and your extra homework reading. And then the only thing we have to do is I'm still planning to present at 9:05 on August 5th and down in Denver. And I know Director McCombs is coming along to kind of support me in the background, or he's going to be Mason next week. So anybody else who wants to come and join me, you can. What are your thoughts on that? I'm more than open if some people want to come and show their support, or you can always join in online and watch.
Yeah, and I'd say just email Chair Shattuck McNally and I if that does pique your interest, and we can also talk about it at the full council meeting next week.
All
Great.
right.
Well, thank you all. We'll send these out to the full council.
Mark, you had a quick question?
No, just a comment for you, Jody. It's been my experience in going and doing this that the Senate committees take in-person testimony more seriously than phoning it in a presentation. I think there's a huge difference there if you make the effort to go down there.
Oh, I am. Yeah,
I've done it in the past.
Yeah, I'm going in person. I did that last year with some bills that were really important for Laramie County, and that's how we got the tiny home bill and other stuff passed. So yeah, I plan on going in person. I had another meeting, but I'm not going to that other district meeting, and I'm planning to go down there and be there and be in person. So no, I agree with you. It has to, it makes the effort. So I'm planning to go then. So all right. Thank you, everyone. I just need a motion to adjourn, and thanks, Mark. We appreciate everything you had to say.
I'd move to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You guys are awesome. Thanks for all your time. We're doing a lot of great work, and it's really something to be proud of, and I appreciate everyone's time. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on the 4th.
Thank
care.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks all.
Can't get it to click.